Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, Measuring the AI Impact of PR. I am Elliot. I'm the head of analytics and PR at Released. I have been doing some form of PR reporting for a very long time now. I worked in a PR agency in the 1990s, gluing press clippings into a physical book. But I now spend my days working on tools to help PR people to showcase their work and prove their impact through our reporting platform, Released. So, who is this webinar for? Well, what's been happening very recently is there's been lots and lots of talk about AI, about measuring AI, and it's very easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by all of that, and to think, should we be doing this? How should we be doing this? Which tools should we use? There's a lot of info; it can feel very overwhelming. So, what we wanted to do was to just talk you through a very simple, hopefully easy to understand framework for measuring this sort of thing. And hopefully by the end of that, you guys will feel much more confident about it. You'll be able to talk about it with clients, stakeholders in amongst your team. And a little bit of housekeeping before we crack on. It's going to be about 20, 25 minutes. There'll be a few minutes at the end for some questions if you have them. And if you do think of any questions as we go along, please put them in the chat window, and I will look through and try to answer some of those if I can. And please do stay to the end if you can, because what we're going to do at the end is not only talk you through the framework itself, but show you how this has been implemented into some brand new tools for PR people to showcase the impact that their coverage has on PR. So we are going to get started now. So how do we show that our coverage is impacting AI? So since AI burst onto the scene a couple of years ago, we've been hearing this question come up a lot. So we're getting it from our customers more and more frequently. We're also seeing this sort of question being asked on LinkedIn. And we've been at events recently where this sort of thing is being discussed. You've probably been asked this yourselves by clients or stakeholders, or you've been asking it. And so this webinar is all about answering this question. So for the last decade, PR agencies and teams have been using Release to create visual reports that showcase their coverage and prove the impact of their work. And so what happens is that people come to us, they come to the platform with their coverage at the end of a period of activity or the end of a campaign. And it's our job to think of ways that we can analyze that coverage and demonstrate the impact it's had on the target audience. So as our customers were asking about AI impact, asking that question from the last slide, we felt it was very much our job to help answer that question. So we spent the last couple of years going very deep down the AI rabbit hole. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the approach that we've developed to measuring AI impact and why we feel it's the appropriate approach specifically for PR people. So one of the first things that we did when we started researching this was that we looked at the available tools that were out there. And what we realized, there were lots of them, and they're more and more every day. This is a real growth area. But they're all very, very similar. They all take a very similar approach. So there's lots of standalone tools like these ones on the left, and then a lot of the kind of incumbent monitoring tools and databases, and people like HubSpot have developed them in their products as well. And what we actually found was that we felt these just weren't a great fit for the needs of PR people and the way that PR people work and the questions that PR people ask. So to illustrate this, this is Dan, who is a imaginary head of digital marketing. And so he covers stuff like SEO, digital advertising, and GEO is becoming, general GEO AI visibility is becoming part of his remit. And so those AI visibility tools are a really good fit for people like Dan because their starting point is this question: how visible is my brand in AI? And so to answer that question, they produce or they query lots of generic sort of category level prompts. So things like, what is the best brand for X, or can you recommend Y? And then what they do is when they get the responses back, they will look to see if your brand is featured in those responses, but they'll also log which sources might be cited in those responses. Now, for PR people, if we take someone like Mandy, who's a PR account director, now Mandy is doing PR activity, media relations, and then at the end of that, hooray, lots of coverage. And so the starting point is very different. The starting point when we're thinking about PR is how did my coverage impact AI? Because that's the starting point. Those generic category prompts aren't, or very often aren't, particularly relevant. The next question is, which prompts would my coverage answer? And then so in terms of measurement, what we want to know is, would my coverage impact responses to those prompts? So this is, as you can see, this is a very different starting point, and this is the starting point for our framework, our measurement framework, and I'm going to talk you through that measurement framework and explain it to you. And what I'd like to do for that is to use an example as we go along. And so I'd like you to think that you or we together are with a PR agency or the PR team PRing Netflix, but specifically the gaming options that are available now on Netflix. So we're doing a campaign to promote the games on Netflix that they have now. So I'm just going to use that example as we go along. So let's talk about our framework. So we call our framework the AIMS framework. And each of these letters stands for a step in the framework, and I'll talk you through what each of those are and how it works. But the word AIMS is also really useful because it tells us how we should think about this, what our starting point should be. It should be the aims and objectives of our target audience, the target audience for our campaign. Because it's those aims and objectives that drive people to AI in the first place, to want to answer questions, to want to find out information. So that's really the sort of overarching guiding principle for how we measure this. So let's talk through each step. So A is for audience, I is for input, M is for model, and S is for source. And I'm going to talk you through each of those individually. So we start by thinking about our audience. So this is not the entire audience for the brand that we are promoting. This is very, very specifically the target audience for the thing, the product, the brand, the event, whatever it is we're promoting in our stories, in the coverage. And so if we think about Netflix as our example, we want to think about all the things that you're probably already thinking about when you're doing the planning at the planning stage of your campaign and when you're starting to work with a new product or a new client. So we want to think about things like the profile of our target audience for this product or service. So in this case, we're thinking about things like age, location, the sort of jobs that they do, income, but we're also thinking about tastes and preferences and stuff like that. So, for Netflix games, these are casual gamers. These are not people that are sort of, hardcore gamers who are going to go out and buy very expensive consoles and stuff like that. And it's people who usually play games on their phones or on a device. We then think about the needs of this audience. And again, this is all about the needs that relate specifically to the thing we're promoting. So in this case, those needs might be affordable games, a wide range of games, something that's accessible to them easily, things that they can play on their phone. Those are their needs as they relate to our product or service. And then finally, the next step is the tasks that this audience will carry out in order to satisfy those needs. So these things are the reasons they will go to AI in the first place. Why would a member of this target audience open their phone, open up ChatGPT or Claude and type something in? So these are things like to research options, to get pricing information, to read reviews. These are specific tasks. So this is our building up our audience. The next step in the process, once we understand that audience, is input. What does that mean? It's the stuff that people literally type into their AI chatbots. So there are different words for these prompts, which is the word that I'm generally going to use, but sometimes queries or simply just questions. Okay, so this is the stuff they're going to put in. So what we really want to start thinking about is, what is it our target audience are going to enter into these AI chatbots in order, that relates to our product or service and specifically the stuff we're talking about in our coverage. Now, what I'd like you to have a look at here is something, this is an example of something that we call the brand prompt universe. And this is an example of the Netflix brand prompt universe. And so the brand prompt universe is literally every single prompt that anyone could ask about or related to Netflix. Okay. And we call it the brand prompt universe because it's vast and ever expanding. So this covers everything you can think of. So parental controls, how do I stop my child watching unsuitable content? Stuff around their shows and their news, investor relations. You've got payment issues. You've got all of this stuff. Now, the important point here is when we are measuring the impact of our coverage, is that 99.9% of this is entirely irrelevant. It's unlikely or highly unlikely or almost impossible that a piece of coverage about the gaming options would answer questions about how to change your credit card. So we just simply don't need to measure that stuff. So if we don't care about most of the prompts, which prompts do we actually care about and do we want to include in our list? So the prompts we care about exist at this intersection between these three factors. So we've got the stuff that's in our brand prompt universe, which I just mentioned. We've got the objectives of the campaign. What's the product we're promoting? What do we want people to think about it? What information do we want to communicate about it? And then we've got the needs of the target audience that we established in that first step. So where those sort of three things interact, it's in there that we get our relevant prompts that we want to measure. So what we end up with is a list of prompts. That list will end up being very long because it will cover lots and lots of different things. But I've just put 3 or 4 in here, and I'll just read out a couple to illustrate what we mean. So do I need to pay extra for Netflix games, or is it included in my standard plan? So as you can see, this prompt is taking the need for cost-effective or affordable games, and it's translating that into a prompt because this is a realistic thing that someone might go and ask AI. And another one, I keep hearing that some streaming services now include games. Which ones do, and what kind of games are they? Now, what you might have noticed, there's a bit of a difference between those two. So the first one mentions the brand name, Netflix. Second one doesn't. And that leads me on to the next point, and this is really important, that when creating this list of relevant prompts, you want to actually have 2 sets. You want to have branded prompts, which is simply include the brand name, and you want to have non-branded. And these don't include the brand name. And the reason that you want to have these 2 different prompt types is that they broadly map to these 2 parts of the customer journey or the funnel, whatever way you want to describe it. So non-branded prompts are the types of things that people will ask before they've read coverage or are aware that the product even exists. So they have a need, and these prompts are driven by their need, and they're kind of higher level prompts. And then the branded prompts will come once they've become aware of that product or service. That could be because they read the media coverage, but it could also be because somebody's mentioned it to them or told them. And this is where they're diving deeper, and they're really trying to do more deeper research. And so they're going to be asking things, does Netflix X, Y, Z? So it's important to measure both of those because you can see where your campaign, where your coverage might have had the most impact. So the next step is model. So when we say model, what we mean is the specific AI model that people are using, because each model will behave slightly differently. And also the model, and what I mean is ChatGPT, Claude, etc., they already know stuff about the person who is using it. They know stuff because of previous conversations. They also know what time of year it is. They might even know what the weather's like outside, and they bring that information to bear when they are answering a prompt, but also when they're selecting sources. So that will impact whether an article gets selected or not. To illustrate this, if you think of the prompt, can you recommend a good restaurant in Canary Wharf? If you've got 2 people, one's using ChatGPT and others using Gemini, and these people have different profiles, as you can see here, that the job of the AI is to recommend the best restaurant for them. And so the recommendations are likely to be different, and also the sources that get selected will therefore likely be different. So these factors are built into our framework and our within our product to ensure that there's enough range of prompts to cover off these this variability. So these three steps all come together to generate our list of prompts, and that answers kind of the first part of the question, which is to say, based on our coverage and the thing that we're promoting, what are the things that our target audience are likely to ask AI? Once we know that, we can ask the second part of the question, which is, if people are asking those things, how likely is it that our coverage would be used and would impact responses to those prompts? So why would ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever you're using select one of a piece of your media coverage from your campaign over another source that it can choose? So it's worth thinking about this as a huge competition, because AI models can, in effect, select from any visible live web page. Okay, and to put that into perspective, Google indexes about 8 billion web pages. So you're competing with 8 billion web pages, whether your coverage will be selected as a source. So why does it select one source and not another? So there's two broad kind of things, the factors that are taken into account here. So the first one is visibility. So this is literally, can the AI bot see and read and use the content that's in your article? What you're seeing here is something called the robots.txt file. This sits on every web page. And what this does is it lists every bot or scraper and that is either allowed or disallowed from seeing the content. And this is from the bbc.co.uk. And what you can see here, various well-known bots, ChatGPT is mentioned there, Perplexity, Claude. Now, it's important to know that this isn't a binary thing. It's not black and white. It's not either bots are blocked or not. Some websites block one or two and not others. And it really depends on the niche that you're in, whether it's more newsy or more magaziney. So there's various factors, but it's really, really important to know, because if a particular article can't be read or accessed by AI, it simply can't have any impact on the response. So that's really important. The second factor to take into account is specificity. And this is the state or quality of being exact, particular, and clearly defined. And this is all about the actual content of the article. So to put that into to make that relative to any given article, a source that includes clearly defined information that exactly answers a particular question will be selected over a source that's vague or loosely answers the question or doesn't answer it at all. So depending on the thing the person asks, if an article answers that particular question really well, it's got a very high chance of being selected as a source over something else. So there are lots of things, qualities of articles that go into determining the specificity, whether it's a good source or not. And we did a huge study to identify what all of those factors are. And then what we did is we compiled them into a scorecard. And so when you put in your media coverage into our system, we analyze the coverage and it gets scored against all these different criteria. I won't go into great detail as to what each of those are. There's an article I'll share at the end, so it'll explain each of them. But each of these gets scored, and each of these is like a signal as to whether this is a good article to answer this particular query or prompt. And then all of those scores feed into a formula, and out the other end comes an AI impact score. And that score is out of 100. And it's essentially saying the higher this number, the more likely that this article would be used to answer this given prompt. We then take all of those scores for all of the prompts. That gives an article level score. And then we take an average of all of those articles to give a score for everything that's an average across everything that's in your report. So regardless of whether you've got, you know, 10 pieces of coverage or 100, because there's different types of, there's different campaigns. Some get a lot of coverage, some don't. You can look at the average AI impact across your score, and it will take into account the visibility and the article quality. So let's go back to our original question. How do we show that our coverage is impacting AI? So to summarize our approach is the approach is specifically for PR people who've generated media coverage. We start by really understanding the audience. What are they likely to search for or enter into AI? And will our coverage be selected as a source to impact those answers? So the next question is how might we use this in practice? So we can look at our coverage. We can look at the coverage that's in a report at various different levels. So we can look at it at a coverage level. Which coverage was actually visible and which wasn't? Which coverage has the greatest AI impact and which ones didn't? And why? You can look at that at a brand level or a non-branded level. We can look at the publication level. So which publications drove the most AI impact? Which publications were not useful in terms of AI visibility? We can look at the specific prompts that were generated, and we can see which prompts were most impacted by our coverage. What type of things were people entering where our coverage would be a really good source? Were they branded or non-branded prompts? And that tells us something about the parts of the user journey, customer journey that our coverage might be impacting. And finally, we can look at campaign performance. I use the word campaign very loosely, just a period of media activity. What was the overall AI impact at a campaign level? And then that you might be able to compare that against over time. So look at how did we do versus the same period in the same quarter, in last year, or this quarter versus last quarter, or this month versus last month. But you could also look at competitor analysis as well. Now, what the next thing I'd like to talk about is actually how does this manifest itself? Has it come to life within the release platform? How do you actually showcase this to your clients or your stakeholders at the end of a campaign? So most of you, many of you are existing customers, and you'll know this already. If you're not, Released is a powerful, flexible product that allows you to select from various different metrics and charts and graphs and add those to a report, as well as all of your coverage and activity. And so all of this stuff is going to be added into that library of metrics and analytics. So you can add these as and where you feel appropriate. But what I've done here is I've just pulled them all together so we can talk through them a little bit. So you can see here the key metrics that we have here: average AI impact across your report. You've got a visibility score, so you can kind of get a sense of how much of your coverage was visible, and an article quality score. So you could get that. So we've separated those two things so you can look at them individually. You could also add these metrics at a brand level. So if you're putting coverage for multiple brands that you might be promoting in your coverage, it will break it down into those as well. So each of these charts looks at a different element of this analysis. So you've got an overall AI impact chart. So this is for each of the brands that you're promoting in your coverage, an average AI impact score so you can compare them. And the chart on the right breaks this down into branded and non-branded prompts, so you can see how, where your performance differed there. This chart with the dots, the scatter chart, this looks at each individual article on both article quality and visibility separately. So anything that's kind of in that top right-hand quadrant is very high impact because the quality score is very high and the visibility is very high. Anything that falls outside of that quadrant is either kind of not as good in terms of quality or just doesn't have the visibility. And that's useful because you can zoom into various different publications that might inform your strategy going forward. And if you click on any of those or hover over those dots, you can get a sort of, you know, you can look at which was the article, which was the publication. The chart on the right, these are the prompt topics. So every time we generate a prompt, we are also summarizing that prompt into what is this generally about. And we then show which are the most common. So that gives a quick view of the areas that people are searching for. And then finally, we actually do kind of league tables of like top coverage and top prompts based on AI impact. So you can see which articles had the most AI impact and which are the prompts that would most be impacted by your coverage. So before we move on to questions in a second, I want to take a moment to just sort of think about the bigger picture again, zoom out a little bit. We've kind of been zoomed into AI. There's all this noise around AI at the moment and GEO and AI visibility, and it can make it seem that this is all that matters. And of course, that's not true at all, right? So AI is just one way that people find information and learn about products and brands, but it's far from the only way. So people still read news. They still use search engines. They have trusted publications that they return to daily or weekly. And coverage is still very often shared on social media. And so when it comes to actually demonstrating the impact of your work, of PR generally, the key is to add AI impact measurement into that mix, not replace it. It's important to show all of the ways that you are impacting your target audience or the objectives of your client or your business. So, what I would like to do is open up to some questions. I'm going to check the chat if you have any questions. So before, just give you a chance if you wanted to add some questions in there. We had a question sort of before this started when I was talking to someone from an agency, and one of the things that they said that they asked was, they felt, are we kind of already a bit behind the curve? Are people already kind of really on top of this and showcasing all of this stuff? And I would say absolutely not. Don't feel scared that you've kind of missed the boat or anything like that. There is a lot of noise. It's easy to talk about this stuff. It's not as easy to start implementing it, and that's why we've spent a long time trying to take away that work for you by building these sorts of frameworks. So by being on a call like this, you're already ahead of the curve in that respect. But don't worry, there's lots of time to figure this stuff out. So I've got a couple of questions that have come in. So could you clarify what the AI impact report metric represents regarding the 78 in the example? Is 100 the maximum score? Yes. So it's out of 100, and in a way, it works similar to domain authority, which a lot of people will be very aware of. So it's a predictive score. It's like a probabilistic score. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, how likely is it? This is how I would sum up. How likely is it that a piece of coverage will be used to influence or impact the answer to a given prompt? So it's a probabilistic score. The higher, the better, essentially. I hope that answered that question. To use this functionality, how do brands get to their prompts? Is Release doing that work? So yes, so if you are using Released, all you have to do, and this is how all of our metrics work generally, is you just put in your media coverage, and then you select which charts you like, and then our system does everything. So what it's doing is it's looking at the content of your articles. It's inferring what is the target audience, what can we ascertain about them, and we've trained AI to do that. It's very, very powerful, and it goes through those steps. who's their target audience, what are their needs, and then what are they going to be going to AI for, and then we translate that into a range of prompts, and we end up with this detailed list. You could actually do that yourself, and you could use AI to do that. You could just go through a series of steps if you weren't a released user. Um, so, got time for a couple of more questions that we'll go through here. Um, is there a way to know which publication or story is doing better on geo, like a views count on a web page? Um, Obviously, I could talk about this stuff all day, and I'm happy to kind of talk about it in more detail if you want to kind of have a specific chat. Um, we mustn't think about AI in the same way that we think about Google, where they have like an index and they say, this is how many searches each thing get. The truth is that AI is really kind of a black box. We don't, nobody knows because it's not made public how many people search for any particular uh, given prompt. So all we can really do is infer what are the prompts that we think our audience is likely to search for, and then how likely is it that our article would be used. But once that you have that content, as we showed here, you can look at a publication level and you can say, how visible were articles on that particular platform. And you can say, um, articles on that platform tended to be of a higher quality. And it might be because, they write longer form articles and they tend to include a lot more information from a press release. So you can definitely get information like that that might be used. I'll go through two more questions and then I think we will have to wrap it up. But as I said, please email me. I am happy to talk about this until the cows come home. So, do you offer this as a standalone service that does not include the release coverage report subscription? So, initially, we are going to implement this into release, obviously, because it's an existing platform, is being used every day by thousands of people. So, we can get lots of feedback, we can improve the product. We are thinking about creating a standalone tool that may be kind of a limited free version or something like that. We're not entirely sure, but we will be working. We'll think about that. Ultimately, our job is just to try to get as many kind of useful tools in the hands of PR people as possible. So yes, it's a possibility. As I think we're going to have to wrap that up, but I think Richard, my colleague, has put into the chat that we are noting all of these questions down. We're getting lots in the chat we've had from other places as well. And what we might do is actually produce like what I'm thinking of doing is bring all of these questions into like an FAQ. We'll answer them and then we'll send that out with the recording at the end. Or not immediately, we have to edit it, but we'll send it out with the recording. I also have an article, kind of guide, white paper that goes through the AIMS framework in a lot more detail, and so that will be very useful for if you want to kind of recap, but also if you want to send it on to colleagues, clients, whoever, to kind of have a bit more of a conversation around it. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I really hope you found it useful, and we will wrap it up there. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.